Next, our contributing correspondent Jeff Berkowitz talks with Glenn Farkas, Republican Senate candidate in the 9th District. He's running against Democratic candidate Representative Daniel Biss. This runs about 30 minutes.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest Glenn Farkas. Glenn is a state Senate candidate in running as the Republican in the 9th District. That is an open seat that has been held for a number of years by Jeff Schoenberg, the Democrat. He is moving on to do other things, so there's an open seat. And Daniel Biss, who's a state rep in the area, I guess that would be in the 17th District,
That's correct.
Is looking to move up, and he's facing Glenn Farkas. And we're going to find out a little bit this evening about how these guys differ on the issues. We've had Daniel Biss on the show before. We now have Glenn Farkas here this evening, and we look forward to having the two of them on together to talk about the issues. You'd like to do that, Glenn?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Not so, well, one, to inform the viewers, the issue contrast, but also, you know, from time to time, state senators actually debate. They get up on the floor, they discuss with each other, sometimes within their own caucus, within the same party, sometimes with a different party. And so viewers want people who can actually represent them, who can articulate their viewpoints. Presumably the viewers and constituents would want somebody who articulates a viewpoint that's somewhat similar to the constituents. So I ask you, Glenn Farkas, taxes are often an issue. And back in 2010, late 2010, after the election, Democrats, the majority of Democrats, not the majority of Republicans, I don't think, voted to support an increase in the individual income tax.
Correct.
And the corporate tax. Mr. Biss, I believe, supported that. Is that right?
I believe so.
How would you have voted?
I would have voted against it. I would have voted to not increase the personal or the corporate income tax rate. I believe all the Republicans voted against it, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was a sole party line vote.
And now they might say to you, well, look, they're just barely balancing the budget now. There's still $5 or $6 billion of unpaid bills. How would you get by if you didn't have that additional $5 or $6 billion that came in from the increase in the income tax?
Well, I think as the case with the federal government, the state governments are no different, is that they have tended to always look to raise taxes first and not look for ways to cut money. I think all of us as citizens, I know my family and people
cut
that I
money,
know,
you said?
Cut expenses.
Okay.
Cut expenses from their budget. I mean, as a citizen, when we start to struggle, we decide to look at the items we can cut first before we go out and ask our boss for a raise or ask my clients, it would be for my business, for more money.
Well, do you think the general revenue budget now is about $33 billion? Do you think there's $5 billion of fat that you could cut?
Well, there's certainly a lot that could be cut. I don't know the specifics, but I think we could probably find a couple $1 billion to cut and go on down that road. And I think we could stimulate private business more to make up for that in growth.
And where would you look for those cuts? Where would be major areas?
Well, certainly the two biggest things, as everyone's been talking about for the last 6 months, and one of the reasons I got involved in this race is that pensions and Medicaid are the two biggest drivers, probably eating up close to half the budget right now. So we certainly would have to sit down and make some decisions on pensions. It's not going to be an easy situation. It didn't happen overnight. It's not going to get solved overnight, but those two are the biggest areas where I think we could have some substantive cuts.
I think in the last session, the legislature supported legislation that cut, I think it was legislation, maybe it was just done by executive authority, not even sure myself, but cut spending on Medicaid about, I think, $1.6 billion.
$7 billion, I think.
Yeah, overall it went down 2.3, but it was not a cut in spending. There are other ways in which that happened. Would you have liked to see Medicaid even more than $1.6 or $7 billion?
I think it's a good start. Again, being outside the bubble of Springfield and doing a lot of research over the last couple months since I got involved, I think it's a good start. Certainly nobody in this state, and certainly not Republicans, want to throw the poor people out to the curb.
Yeah, I mean poor people, low-income people, who
people
can't afford, who may not have insurance and need health care, you would still
absolutely
like to give them health care.
We need Medicaid. That was the program was set up for that purpose. I just think that this state and other states, well, especially Illinois, have increased the eligibility requirements or let more people onto the system. We've already rolled over, I think it's something like $8 billion in unpaid bills from last year to this year. And it's hard for us to afford what we have and then take on the increases that are expected to come down the line.
So there are differences between you and Biss, Representative Biss, on the income tax, at least how you would have both voted then. Now, with the income tax in place, I think it's set, a portion, not all of these, but a portion of the increase is set to sunset, to be removed by 2015. Would you support that? Would you like to see that sunset occur, that legislation play its way out? Some people are saying the whole tax should be repealed. Which do you think?
Absolutely. I think the corporate tax we should definitely repeal or sunset out.
Repeal the increase in the corporate.
Increase in the corporate tax,
Okay.
and I would also be in favor of reducing the personal tax or repealing it or sunsetting it altogether. I think that's the negotiation we'd have to take as rational people in Springfield. I know this state has budget challenges, and we know that we have to be taxed. I think from the Republican point of view, we've too often found out that the government's always, their first knee-jerk reaction is to raise taxes and not take a really strong look at cutting things. And I'm not against taxes. I don't think any Republicans are, but they just have to be fair, and they have to be well thought out. And I think the increase in taxes, while it was strictly a partisan vote, was not the right thing for Illinois at the time in 2011.
So do you know if Representative Biss differs from you or agrees with you about what he would do with that reduction of the current tax, either by sunset or repeal?
No, I'm pretty sure that Representative Biss was very happy to vote for the 3 to 5% increase. I've seen him speak before, and he's on record, I believe even on your show maybe, that he said that he would like to see a graduated income tax in Illinois, something like California and New York have.
So-called progressive tax.
Progressive tax.
Higher income people would be taxed at a higher rate than lower income people. And you don't favor that?
I don't think there's any way we can go there. I mean, if that was the solution, California, New York, New Jersey, all those other states that have progressive taxes would be sterling examples of well-run government. And in fact, California is very poorly run. They're in probably a worse situation than we are. We are worse in per capita, but strictly dollar amount, California is worse. So just because the state can tax more doesn't mean they're going to balance the budget. It just gives them an opportunity to spend more money.
All right. On the pension issue, which is, as you know, that said that, actually, I think the estimates of the underfunding vary from like 83 billion to maybe 300 billion when you include cities as well as the state underfunding. Whether you include new standards, which would raise the level of the state underfunding, whether you include healthcare retirement benefits being, state healthcare retirement benefits being underfunded. So people are talking not just about 83 billion, but 200 to 300 billion.
Correct.
Short term, I think the Republican Party position, at least short term, they were talking about 401k previously. I believe they don't seem to be talking about that now. They're talking about increasing the employee contribution. Some are. Talking about increasing the retirement age. Some are. Talking about decreasing the COLA, the cost of living adjustment. Would you favor all of those things? That is, increasing the employee contribution of the state employees, increasing the retirement age, and decreasing the COLA?
Absolutely. I think all those have to be on the table. Every one of
Not
those
on the
have to
table.
be on the table.
Would you favor
Yes.
moving ahead with those two increases and that decrease that I mentioned?
Yes, let me tell you why. We're so underfunded, as you made the good point. Depending on who you speak to, what day of the week is, how the stock market does, the pensions are underfunded from $85 billion to well over $200 billion if you include healthcare. So we have a huge hole we have to dig out of. And for me, it's always been a matter of fairness. 90-some% of the regular population, those private citizens, don't have pensions. Myself, my family, we have 401k plans. There's no guarantee for us. At the heart of the matter in a pension is a guarantee. And I don't believe the taxpayers...
And the guarantee is of a defined benefit as opposed to a defined contribution, which would be a 401k.
Yes.
So you're saying would you long-term remove all of the defined benefit pensions in the state of Illinois and have only a 401k type defined
I think
contribution?
over time, the state, not only the state, but many other states need to extricate themselves from the pension business. I would like to see us transition from a defined benefit pension plan to a 401k plan. So all new employees go into a 401k. People who are in midstream will have to renegotiate on the benefit side. People who are already in retirement certainly probably have to look at the COLA. We have to freeze it for a few years. We have to lower it, tie it to the CPI, do a better job of managing it, because from whatever
which of those things? Should we freeze it? Should we lower it?
I would be in favor of freezing it for 1 to 2 years, freezing salaries,
freezing COLA. Do you think that does it for 1 to 2? Do you think some would say maybe you'd have to do it for 10 years?
I don't know what the number is. It's all dependent on how the economy goes, how much the employees contribute, what are the pension returns, and therein lies the problem with pensions, Jeff, is that it's a forecast. And I know, being in the investment business, is that when you forecast things out longer than 1 to 2 years, you're almost automatically wrong. And in a pension program, you're trying to forecast out pay raises,
Right, but you
when
have to make
people go-
decisions if you're a state legislator
Absolutely.
based on those forecasts. Right now, is there any way you could make some decisions based
Yeah.
on those forecasts?
If we could do it, and again, this has been from what I read in the research, is the constitutionality of changing benefits. So I think what I would say to the teachers and the police and the fire, everybody is that we have to make a decision. The ship is sinking. There's no doubt that the ship is sinking. Do you want a lifeboat or not? And I also say is that they're victims of this. And I think if you've seen on my website, I call this political malfeasance.
Who's the victim?
The teachers, the fire,
You really
the
think they're
police.
victims?
I think they're victims of their union leaders, of the politicians, the powers that be.
How are they victims?
Well, they've done what they're supposed to do. They went to work, they put in their money, and they were relying on the politicians and the union leaders and the actuaries and the people managing money to do their job. And I think the biggest part of the problem, for what I've seen, is that they didn't fund the pensions. Now, pensions are a very risky
But
vehicle.
Ted Dabrowski, the Illinois Policy Institute, you know those guys?
Yes.
He says that these agreements were sort of sweetheart agreements. That is, you had Democratic politicians for a number of times, not always, but Democratic politicians often agreeing to high pension benefits with public sector unions, which turned around and then gave substantial contributions to those Democratic politicians.
Very true.
So are these union employees, who must have known this was happening, are they victims?
Well,
They're the people who elected these leaders to play this game, this charade. They're the people who often voted for these Democratic politicians. Now, if people say, those promises shouldn't be kept because that wasn't a real agreement, where do you come down?
Yeah,
Do you think those promises should be kept? Or should you say, no, there wasn't a real agreement, that was a charade?
I think the promises have to be renegotiated. It doesn't change the fact that they're still not victims. There are people who are in retirement, the teachers who put their money in, who are expecting maybe to retire in so many years and that money's not going to be there. I still see them as victims. That doesn't mean we can't go to the table and say we need to take back some of those benefits. Whatever that amount is, whether it's 5%, 10%, my plan would be, you've probably seen what I've talked about, is that punishing the politicians over this, because the politicians are the ones who went in the backroom dealings, went with the Democratic leaders, got gantry and
How is a voter
contributions.
trying to decide between you and Daniel Biss here? Should they punish Daniel Biss because he wasn't a politician at that time, I don't think, when these deals were made? So how do they decide between you and Daniel Biss on this pension issue?
Well, I think Daniel Biss, for one, is too close to the action. I mean, he's getting money from the teachers' unions. I know for a fact he's gotten, in his last reporting, $25,000 from the teachers' union. So again, you stated, before we just started down this road, is that Democratic politicians got donations from the unions. They got elected. They went in the back rooms and made negotiations. So Daniel Biss has a very big conflict of interest in negotiating. I do not. I don't have any of those conflicts of interest with those people.
Well, but could you have similar conflicts of interest? Because you will be taking money from some entities, right?
Sure.
Where would you get most of your money?
Individuals.
Not from, like, the Illinois Medical Society?
Haven't gotten it yet,
Not
but
the
if you know
Illinois
somebody,
Hospital
if you know
Association?
someone there, please let them give me a
But
call.
would that give you conflicts of interest in terms of how you would be voting on issues affecting doctors or issues affecting hospitals or issues affecting healthcare?
Yeah, it could be, but those aren't the issues that are on the table right now. The issues on the table is the pensions, that and the Medicaid, which are crushing the budget.
What about if
So-
somebody said you want to reduce the corporate income tax if corporations are giving you money and they would benefit from a lower corporate income tax rate? Does that present a similar conflict of interest to you?
I deal with conflicts of interest every day in my life and my business too, and I think, yes, it would present it. But at the end of the day, I'd be making that decision based on economics, what I believe, and how I think we should tax individuals and corporations. But I go back to the pension issue. That is the issue right now that is at the heart of why we are running such negative deficits. And Daniel Biss will not be able to negotiate. And at the end of the day, too, Mr. Madigan, as you know, controls the state for the most part, controls the Democratic Party. And I believe Mr. Biss's voting record is very well tied along with Mr. Madigan. So if you vote for Mr. Biss, you're voting for Michael Madigan's program. If you vote for me,
Are you tying
you're not.
Biss to Madigan? Do you think that's fair?
I think it's fair.
I mean, do you think there are people who say that the Republican Party is trying to run in this election against Mike Madigan? That is, if the Republican Party, to take you as an example, but other people running for state rep, if they could say a vote for Daniel Biss is a vote for Mike Madigan. Mike Madigan has conflicts. Mike Madigan's not good for the state. You should vote for Glenn Farkas.
I'm sure.
I mean, is that something you would be out there when you talk to people, one by one, or is it something you would just like to see maybe on the ads, but you're not going to make that
Yeah,
argument?
that's not going to be my primary lead, because I would say a lot of the people in the state don't know who Mike Madigan is. Too many people don't follow
Turns
politics.
out that there are, and his unfavorables, at least from what I've seen in polling the Rich Miller and Capital Facts. You read Capital
Yes,
Facts?
I've seen them.
Well, he seems to be saying Mike Madigan. Republicans might be onto something here. Speaker Mike is known and is not that popular.
I think more people today know than certainly 4 or 5 years ago, and because we've made this issue of pensions so prevalent, Mr. Madigan turned over the pension deal to Tom Cross and just basically washed his hands of the deal. So I think more
Do you
people
think he
know.
put a poison pill in there when he said something about he said basically, okay, you don't want to put the cost shift in here, you handle it, but essentially without the cost shift, you're not getting many Democratic votes.
Yeah, I think
Is that what Mike Madigan did to Tom Cross?
I believe so. But he didn't have if the Democrats control the legislature, the Senate, the House, and the governor's mansion, if Mike Madigan doesn't want to go along with it, it's not going to pass. So by passing over to Tom Cross, I know he gave him a political.
So what's your
football.
basic pitch when you're out there talking to people as you walk the precincts, why they should vote for you as opposed to Daniel Biss?
Mine is the biggest, is the advocate for the taxpayer. I'm so fed up with the corruption, the politics of the government. We have people that many times, like myself, weren't involved in politics for years. We're raising our families, we were working our careers, and we woke up one day and finally saw our tax property bills increasing every year and said, what's going on here? We look at the state, we see the budget deficits, we see the debt, the borrowing to pay pensions, and we wonder who's running the ship. So I believe there's an appetite out there for someone who comes as a citizen legislator like myself, who's not part of the establishment machine, the Democratic Party, and they'll be willing to vote for someone like me who will go down and work for them and be an advocate for the taxpayer.
Okay, in short run, you're in favor of cutting benefits and raising costs to employees in the public sector unions. Is that a reasonable characterization?
I think so.
And you're saying you don't think Biss is as much in favor of that as you,
Certainly
because
not.
of his indebtedness, in your view, to the public sector unions.
Yeah, and let me finish one too on that, is I think the politicians and union leaders have had a big deal in running this thing to the ground. Whatever we would negotiate, not just Glenn Farkas, but whatever the Republicans and Democrats together, because we're going to have to negotiate this, whatever we would have to come up with to reduce benefits in some way, whether it's 5% or 10%, I would ask the politicians in their pension plan to double it. If we ask the state teachers and the police to take 5% benefit reduction, I think we ought to make sure that the politicians reduce their benefits by double that amount. I think it's only fair because the leadership in the state has not been leaders. I personally will not take a pension if I'm elected. That'll be another major difference between myself and Dan Biss. I'm not going to Springfield to collect a pension.
You won't take any pension?
No.
What will you do, turn it over to charity?
Turn it over to charity. Certainly I will not take a pension. I'll decline that.
Will you continue to have your private employment?
Yes.
And your private employment is what?
My firm manages money for individuals, small businesses.
Do you think there's any conflicts of interest there?
There will always be conflicts of interest, absolutely.
But how do you deal with them then?
You deal with it in the most ethical way you can. Disclosure. You're out with the clients in advance. You tell them that if I manage money for a particular individual and they give me money, I cannot take into account anything that they would want personally. It's a strictly separate, the business and the political life.
Do you know if Representative Biss is continuing to generate income in addition to the income he gets as a state rep, or is being a state rep a full-time job for him?
I have no idea.
If it were a full-time job, do you think that would be an advantage to him to argue to the constituents he has no conflicts because the only income he's generating is from being a state rep? You're doing something that's not corrupt, not illegal, but by having an outside job in addition to being state rep, you're not devoting full time to it. You're also incurring conflicts.
Well,
I don't know if he's arguing that, but if he did, how would you respond?
It's not accurate because he does have conflicts.
He does.
The simple fact that we talked earlier that he's raising money from the union conflicts, and I think we need more people who are state citizen legislators. I think too many people go down to Springfield and are working as full-time politicians in really a part-time job. We're not expected to be there all year long. And if you had your foot in the private sector, I don't think they'd make some of the delusional decisions that they're making. Okay. Too many people not involved in the private sector. My counterpart, Mr. Biss, is not involved in the private sector.
Your business is basically, you have your own business, right?
Yes.
You basically manage wealth for people, is that what you say?
Mm-hmm.
Manage their portfolios, try to help them maximize their wealth.
Yes.
Their rate of return on their investments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you say you're knowledgeable and experienced in from your prior positions, right?
Absolutely.
It's something you studied, undergraduate degree, double degree, and what,
Yes.
finance and what
I have
else?
an undergraduate degree in marketing finance and a master's of finance.
Okay.
So, and I work in the pension field. I do 401ks for clients. You know, I manage money for people in IRAs.
He's a math. He was a mathematician. He was teaching math at the University of Chicago.
Yep.
Seems like a smart guy. He's proposed legislation dealing with pensions. You're a smart guy. You understand finance. You think your backgrounds are sufficiently different where there's an advantage to having one or the other there?
Yeah, I think the key thing here is you don't have to be a mathematician to solve the problems we have. There's not calculus problems down at Springfield. It's really multiplication,
Matter
division,
of
subtraction.
cutting benefits for
Yes.
pensions and raising the costs
certainly
or employee contributions.
and certainly I'm more qualified on the pension front, 401k, simply because that's what I do, and I've looked at that for the last dozen years.
And that's something long-term you say the state has to go to. 401ks, no more defined benefit contributions for state employees.
Yeah, I think over time we can transition on. This is not just, other states have done this too. I looked at Rhode Island. And they were a basket case as well with pensions. And the state treasurer out there just passed a comprehensive pension reform bill, which includes defined contribution, mandatory defined contribution, 401k plans.
So the state treasurer passed that?
Yeah, the Rhode Island, she supported it,
She
Rhode
supported
Island passed it.
Well, the state treasurer in this case in Illinois happens to be a Republican. What does Dan Rutherford say?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think that's a problem? Should Dan be going hamlet to hamlet? As some would argue, that's what the Democratic state treasurer did in Rhode Island. Should Dan be doing that?
I would think.
Shouldn't you know? You're a Republican, he's a Republican. You don't know his position?
I don't know his position.
But you should know.
I should know it.
So you would say to Dan?
I would say to Dan.
Tell me your position, tell everybody your position, get on the train here.
We
right?
all have to work together on this. Again, like I said, this didn't happen overnight. There's a lot of people that have cooked this problem into Illinois. And certainly if I'm elected, I'll ask, no one has a monopoly on good ideas. I'll sit down with everybody we can speak with. We'll bring in the teachers' unions. We'll talk to teachers. But we have to look at.
Do you support the teachers' unions in general? Do you think the teachers' unions are a plus or a minus in terms of the quality of education in Illinois?
I think they should. It's a hard question to answer, yes or no.
Let me ask you this. Do you favor charter schools?
I would say yes. I would say anything, more choice is better.
Would you favor, we have in our background, because we have this because we've done a recent show talking about specifically Milton Friedman. We're taping this on August 12th. On July 31st, a big celebration around the country of Milton Friedman's 100th birthday. If he were alive, he'd be 100 now. We often give out this book, Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom, coming to us courtesy of the Heartland Institute. We're fair and balanced. If there's another think tank that takes a more liberal view and wants to give out a comparable book, we'll tout that as well. But Friedman has, one reason why we're talking about that is 57 years ago he wrote an article about school vouchers. In a sense, he's the father of school voucher, school choice. Wrote this book that I just referred to, Capitalism and Freedom, 50 years ago. School voucher, school choice, would you favor that?
Yeah, like I said, I'm in favor of pro-choice in a lot of things. I'd like to have more choice for citizens, and I don't understand.
In education?
In education, everywhere.
Okay, and so if people can take, in the city of Chicago, we spend $15,000 per kid per year. If they could take that money and go to the school of their choice, which they can't now, private or public, you would say that would be a good thing?
I would say why not? If the schools are failing, why should we not give people the opportunity to go to a better school?
What about in your neck of the woods, the 9th Senate District?
I think everywhere you should have choice.
Now, choice, okay.
Our schools are a lot different than what we've got in the inner city.
What are those areas that are included in the 9th Senate District,
We've
roughly?
got Glenview, most of Glenview, Northbrook, Wilmette, Winnetka, Kenilworth, Evanston, part of Skokie, South Glencoe, Northfield, so it's a pretty big district.
Generally, an affluent area.
Generally affluent area.
A good chunk of the North Shore. Generally, schools, you would say, who are high performing.
Yes.
Kids are doing well, they're reading above or at grade level, same with math, same with writing. So some might say there's less need for, even though the people might benefit from school choice, less need there than in the city of Chicago, where many kids are not reading at grade level.
Yeah, less need, but why should they not have the choice as well? There are plenty of kids.
So you would do that. You'd like to see school vouchers for folks in Northbrook.
I would like
and so
to.
forth.
Why not?
And in your hometown, Glenview.
I'd like to hear a rational argument for not giving people the choice to attend the school they want to go to.
You're a fan of Milton Friedman's?
Yes, I am.
You've read it. You've read Capitalism and Freedom?
I have not read the book, but I've read certain articles.
Well, there you go. Here's a copy of the book. You're going to read it now?
Thank you very much. I'm a speed reader.
School Choice. Have you read this book by Herb Wahlberg, The Findings of School Choice?
No, I've not.
You should read it because he collects a lot of findings of school choice, school vouchers. A lot of people say that this record, the evidence is mixed. Mr. Wahlberg thinks it's pretty clear, not just from one finding, from looking at dozens. School choice works, whether it's school choice from charter schools, school vouchers. You think he's right?
From what I believe and basics of what I've read, the articles, yeah, I think it's a good decision to make, is to let people have a choice where to send their kids to school.
On the economy, jobs, is that an issue in Illinois?
How could it not be?
So if pensions were taken care of, if we reform pensions, lower benefits, more contributions, dealt with this underfunded liability, would it be the case that more companies may want to come to Illinois less afraid of this burgeoning pension liability out there? Would that help with the job situation?
It would help, but I think from a business perspective, they're not giving the pensions. I mean, so I think the businesses are more concerned about their corporate tax rates.
Lower tax rates, lower income tax rates for their employees, lower corporate tax rates,
regulations,
lower regulations. All of those things would be a way of attracting business, you think?
Yes, there was a great article I read recently where Caterpillar decided that they weren't going to bring another plant here because they looked at the overall fiscal health of Illinois and said, do we want to commit ourselves even deeper to Illinois when they don't seem to be making the right decisions to move the state forward? So I couldn't blame a company like Caterpillar for hedging their bet and not bringing that facility here.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank Glenn Farkas. He is a candidate, a Republican candidate, running in the 9th Senate District. He's running against Democrat State Rep Daniel Biss, who's a state rep trying to move up for the state Senate. Let me ask you, Glenn, social issues, gays, gun, God, abortion, an issue here in the 9th?
I think it's an issue everywhere. It comes
in this
up.
election, is it the economy stupid, or is it's abortion, it's gay rights, it's guns?
I certainly think for my election, it's pensions, Medicaid, promoting business growth. Secondarily so, the 9th district is a very educated district, and those are important issues. I'm not going to minimize that by saying gun control,
on the guns,
abortion.
well, there's a problem there we've seen in Colorado, we've seen in Wisconsin, to get access to high volume firepower. We had some legislation that tries to deal with it, tried in Illinois, but it's difficult. How do you decide when a person is nutty enough that something should be reported? They should be told, somebody should be told the person shouldn't get high volume access to firepower that can do a lot of damage. You understand the problem?
Yes.
Not an easy solution.
Not an easy solution.
But in general, do you favor gun control?
I think we're all in favor of effective gun control.
Would you like to see a ban on assault weapons? There was a federal ban at Lamps. Would you like to see one in Illinois?
I think we have a ban on assault weapons.
Do we,
here.
in the state of Illinois?
Well, we have the most restrictive gun laws.
Do we have a ban on assault weapons in the state of Illinois?
I believe we do.
Okay. And if we didn't, you would favor one?
I think we all would favor a ban on
assault weapons.
On assault-type weapons, firearms, I guess the better term.
Abortion, are you pro-choice or pro-life?
I'm a pro-choice Republican.
All right. So you mean, to you, Roe v. Wade is correctly decided and a good decision?
It's the law of the land right now, and it
doesn't upset you?
I think everybody's upset with the fact of abortion. No one truly likes it.
Parental notice laws, should we have them?
Parental notifications, absolutely. My kids, they have to be told if I give them an aspirin at school.
Okay,
so yes, I want to be notified.
Partial birth abortion, should we ban partial birth abortion? Some people say it's close to infanticide. What do you say?
I believe it already is in Illinois, is law of the land as well. It's on the books.
But do you agree with that?
What the definition of
should there be an
birth?
Exception for partial birth abortion for the life of the mother?
If the life of the mother is in jeopardy, yes.
What about if the health of the mother is at issue?
Well, that is also an issue. Yeah,
what if it's her emotional health, not her physical?
Well, reasonable people can sit down in a room and say where to draw the lines. And I think I'm in favor of keeping abortion safe, legal, but rare. Education, contraceptives, and rational people can sit there and say, what are the reasonable restrictions we need?
Do you think those social issues are going to be the gays, guns, God, and abortion? Do they count much in this November 6th election, or is it about the economy and pensions and jobs? And
I think in this state it's about the economy and pensions. Those issues we can deal.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.